We start with Asim Munir's nuclear threat. The Pakistan Army Chief spoke in the United States and threatened to quote-unquote take down half the world with nuclear weapons. He also said they'll destroy Indian dams. And what was Washington's response? Silence. Meanwhile, 3 months after Operation Sindhur, India makes a major revelation. Our forces shot down 6 Pakistani jets. We'll tell you more. Also counting down to the Trump-Putin meeting in Alaska. Why in Alaska and why is India watching it closely? Also in the US, Trump's extraordinary deal that puts national security up for sale. American chip makers can sell to China if they give 15% of their revenue to the government. In Turkey, an earthquake measuring 6.1 strikes the West. In Gaza, 5 journalists killed in Israeli airstrikes, and in the South China Sea, China and the Philippines square off days after our interview with President Marcos Jr. Also tonight, the stealth jet that stranded again, this time in Japan. Yes, it is the F-35. Also bringing you India's journey to the stars as part of our special series in the run-up to Independence Day. All this and more coming up. The headlines first. Air India to suspend flights between Delhi and Washington, D.C. from next month. The airline says it is due to operational factors like the shortage of aircraft and the continued closure of the Pakistani airspace. Customers with prior bookings will be offered alternative arrangements or full refunds. Staying with India, high drama in the national capital. Leader of opposition Rahul Gandhi briefly detained along with several others. The opposition claims the Election Commission colluded with the ruling BJP to manipulate votes during the 2024 Lok Sabha elections. The BJP says these are baseless allegations, while the poll body has sent a notice to Rahul Gandhi asking for proof. The chief of Iran's top security body arrives in Iraq. It's his first official trip abroad since taking charge. From Baghdad, he will head to Lebanon, where the government has approved a plan to disarm Tehran's ally Hezbollah. Iran has expressed its strong opposition to the move, which has led Beirut to accuse Tehran of interference. Colombian presidential candidate Miguel Uribe has died. 2 months ago, he was shot in the head at a campaign event. Last October, he had announced his intention to run in the 2026 presidential election. The attack has revived fears of a return to the violence of the 80s and 90s, where political murders were commonplace in Colombia. And Mali arrests dozens of soldiers suspected of plotting to overthrow the junta. The West African country has been under military rule since 2020 after back-to-back coups. The junta had initially pledged to return Mali to civilian rule in March 2024, but last month, the military chief extended his rule indefinitely. If only wars were fought with mics, then Asim Munir would have many victories to his name. Unfortunately for him, they're not. Bad jokes cannot shoot down missiles. Religious quotes cannot protect your airfields. But here's what they can do. They can stir the pot. And that's what Munir is doing. The Pakistan Army Chief was in America this weekend. It's his second trip in 2 months. His main agenda was to attend a retirement ceremony. America's Central Command Chief has retired. His name is Michael Kurilla. Now, Kurilla is very close to Pakistani generals. He recently praised Islamabad as a great partner. In exchange, Islamabad gave him a top civilian honor, the Nishan-e-Imtiyaz. And now that Kurilla is retiring, Munir flew to the US. He attended the retirement ceremony. But afterwards, Asim Munir had another event at a hotel in Tampa, Florida. This was a black tie event for the Pakistani diaspora. No phones, no cameras. And this is where Munir unleashed his worst. Most of his speech was dedicated to the recent conflict with India. He made 3 startling remarks. The first one was a nuclear threat, and I'm quoting, "We are a nuclear nation. If we think we are going down, we'll take half the world down with us." How about that? Pakistan's army chief just threatened to bomb half the world. Secondly, he talked about blowing up dams. Remember, India has suspended the Indus Treaty. It can now restrict water flowing to Pakistan. Again, let me quote from what Munir said. We will wait for India to build a dam, and when it does so, we will destroy it with 10 missiles. The Indus River is not the Indians' family property. We have no shortage of missiles. Now, just to be clear, destroying a dam is a war crime. When Russia blew up a dam in Ukraine, the US was outraged. Somehow, I don't see that happening to Munir. Finally, his third remark. He used a crude analogy to warn India against attacking Pakistan. Listen to what he said. I'm quoting again. India is a shining Mercedes coming on a highway like a Ferrari. But we are a dump truck full of gravel. If the truck hits the car, who is going to be the loser? Well, I must say we agree. India is a shining Ferrari and Pakistan is a dump truck. We did not expect such honesty from Asim Munir, but here's the deal. This Ferrari does not drive alone. It is flanked by Rafales, S-400s and BrahMos. So you can use the dump truck for its original purpose, to clear out filth, and we suggest starting with Rawalpindi. It doesn't take an expert to unpack Munir's dangerous language. He's not speaking like a professional army chief. He's talking like a frenzied madman. Just think about it. Nuking half the world, launching missiles at a dam and comparing your own country to a dump truck. That's low even for Pakistan. And India has reacted to his statements. It's a detailed and pointed response. Let me quote from what India has said. Nuclear sabre-rattling is Pakistan's stock in trade. It is also regrettable that these remarks should have been made from the soil of a friendly third country. India has already made it clear that it will not give in to nuclear blackmail. We will continue to take all steps necessary to safeguard our national security. India makes two compelling points. The first is America's role. Munir is spewing this venom on their soil, on US soil. He's threatening war crimes from a hotel in Florida, from President Donald Trump's home state. Yet Washington has nothing to say. Secondly, New Delhi has highlighted the nuclear problem. Let me quote again. This is what they've said. The remarks also reinforce the well-held doubts about the integrity of nuclear command and control in a state where the military is hand in glove with terrorist groups. It's a valid concern. Normally, a country's nuclear arsenal is controlled by civilians, by the elected government leaders. But in Pakistan, it is controlled by the military. And look at the military's language. It's a warning sign for major powers. It is time to defang and denuclearize Pakistan. But I guess that's a different conversation for now. Let's focus on Munir's remarks. Why did he say what he did and why now? The obvious reason is that Munir is off the rails because normal people do not make nuclear threats. But there could be a strategic reason too. Pakistan has always counted on nuclear deterrence against India. They hid behind their nuclear arsenal. But this time India called their bluff. New Delhi launched a conventional attack on Pakistan. We escalated but remained non-nuclear. Even the latest statement reiterates India's new position. Nuclear blackmail will not work. So maybe Asim Munir is trying to return to the old status quo. Maybe he's trying to put nuclear blackmail back on the table, hence the whole dump truck analogy. And this time he's threatening half the world. Again, the idea is clear. If Munir cannot deter India, he's hoping the global community will. He's hoping that others will put pressure on India. Which brings us to the second question. Why is he doing all of this now? Why in America? Perhaps to capitalize on India's souring ties with the US. In fact, Munir spoke about that too. He said Pakistan could offer master classes on balancing rival powers. On behalf of all Indians, no thanks. If we want lessons on hiding inside a bunker, or on losing multiple wars, or on rigging elections and jailing politicians, then maybe Asim Munir is the guy. But on diplomacy, absolutely not. India prefers to be a powerhouse, not a pet for Donald Trump and Xi Jinping.
We have at least 5 fighters confirmed killed and 1 large aircraft.
There was more than one bombshell this weekend. The second came from the Indian military. This one was not a threat. It was a professional and factual debrief, courtesy the Air Force Chief of India. Air Chief Marshal A.P. Singh was in Bengaluru on Saturday. He spoke at a memorial lecture dedicated to one of his predecessors. In that speech, he revealed something major, that India had shot down 6 Pakistani planes. How about that? All the speculation about India's losses, all the unconfirmed media reports, but turns out Pakistan lost 6 planes in May. 5 of them were fighter jets, 1 was possibly an intelligence plane.
We have at least 5 fighters confirmed killed and 1 large aircraft, which could be either an Elint aircraft or an AWNC aircraft, which was taken on at a distance of about 300 kilometers. This is the actually largest ever recorded surface-to-air kill that we can talk about.
The air chief did not specify which fighters, but Pakistan operates 2 main types, the Chinese J-10 planes and the American F-16s. Chances are either of those were shot down. But even more impressive is the 6th kill. The air chief called it a large Pakistani aircraft, possibly a plane used for intelligence. This was shot down from a distance of 300 kilometers. 300 kilometers, imagine that. We're talking well beyond visual range. We're talking deep inside Pakistani territory. How did India manage to do that? For such a kill, you need a long-range interceptor missile. It must be able to track and strike beyond what you can see. In this case, India used the S-400 missiles. These are Russian air defense systems, the S-400s. As the name suggests, their range is up to 400 kilometers. The air chief was all praise for it. He called it a game changer.
Their aircraft tried to penetrate our defenses. Our air defense systems have done a wonderful job. The S-400 system, which we had recently bought, has been a game changer. The range of that system has really kept their aircraft away from their weapons like, those long-range glide bombs that they have. They've not been able to use any one of those because they've not been able to penetrate the system.
Now, this is quite significant because it's the farthest ever recorded aerial kill, 300 kilometers away. Such long-range hits are usually rare. Even if they happen, it's hard to confirm and verify. So how did the Indian Air Force do it? They used electronic tracking. It's a bit like what you see in Hollywood movies. Jets and planes appear on radars as tiny blips. If the blips disappear after your attack, chances are you hit it. That's how the Air Force confirmed these 6 kills. Beyond this, the air chief hinted at other damages too, like at the airfield in Jacobabad. Indian missiles had destroyed hangars there. The air chief confirmed that there were planes inside those hangars, including some F-16s and a surveillance plane. So they may have been damaged too. Finally, the air chief also addressed some of the political issues. We saw a heated debate in Parliament recently in India. The opposition accused the government of curbing the military, of tying their hands during Operation Sindhur. The air chief pushed back against such claims.
There was very clear political will, very clear directions which were given to us, and there were no kind of restrictions which were put on it. If there were any constraints, they were self-made. We, the forces, decided what will be our rules of engagement. We, the forces, decided what will be the escalation ladder that we want to ride on. We decided how we want to control the escalation.
Of course, Pakistan has denied all of this. They say none of their planes were downed by India. I guess that's expected. This is a country that permanently lives in denial. But for India, this is a huge moment. The air chief's lecture highlighted 3 important points. Number 1, this was a high-tech war. It was short, precise and lethal. India fielded cutting-edge equipment to achieve those goals. Number 2, we learned from the past. The air chief spoke about the 2019 Balakot strikes. He talked about the lack of visual proof in that attack.
And in Balakot, we could not get anything from inside, and it became a big issue, trying to tell our own people, unfortunately our own people, as to what we have been able to achieve. We had intelligence of what has gone on inside. We had intelligence of, human kind of intelligence, where we had very clear picture of inside in terms of there has been huge damage. There have been so many terrorists which have been utilized. But we could not convince our own people that, look, we have achieved that.
So this time we did gather proof. India gave detailed before and after images. Another lesson was on synchronization. The Air Chief praised the coordination between the three forces. He said the role of the Chief of Defence Staff, or CDS, made a difference. And finally, the third point, the primacy of air power. The Air Chief called it the biggest takeaway from this conflict. India's air defences did make a difference. The S-400 shot down planes 300 kilometers away. Not a single Pakistani jet came close to our defences. All of them were forced to stay at a distance. It's a success, but it's also a reminder that we must retain this aerial supremacy. Pakistan is set to buy fifth-generation jets from China, but India's homegrown plane is years away, maybe even a decade. Our next priority is to address this gap, to build on the success of Operation Sindhur. August 15th is an important day for India. It's our Independence Day, a day of joy, a day of celebrating our hard-earned freedom. But this year, New Delhi will have one eye elsewhere, around 17,000 kilometers away in Alaska, America's icy outpost and Russia's old neighbor. This is where Vladimir Putin will sit across from Donald Trump. The goal is clear: to end Europe's bloodiest war in decades, the war in Ukraine. But will they succeed? And what will this mean for India? Tonight we'll discuss all of this, starting with the choice of location. Why are they meeting in Alaska, of all places? Officials point to the proximity. You see, Alaska is the closest American state to Russia, just 88 kilometers across the Bering Strait.
Russia and the United States are close neighbors, sharing a border. It seems quite logical that our delegation will simply fly across the Bering Strait, and that such an important and highly anticipated summit between the leaders of our two countries will take place precisely in Alaska.
Of course, the distance is not the only reason. It's also less complicated. As you know, there's an ICC arrest warrant against Vladimir Putin. ICC is the International Criminal Court. Although it's hard to imagine that Putin would be arrested on his way to meet Trump, but the Russians don't want to take a chance. And in this respect, Alaska makes sense. It is far from Ukraine and NATO capitals, plus traveling to Alaska avoids ICC member airspace. So that makes it risk-free. But the most important reason is probably the symbolism. In 1867, a Russian Tsar sold Alaska to the US. It was a deal for $7.2 million. Of course, Putin won't try to buy it back, but the location carries a subtle reminder that land deals are negotiable. And that's the core of Trump's peace plan. Reports suggest the White House wants Russia and Ukraine to swap territories. Russia keeps Donbass and Crimea, but gives back Kherson and Zaporizhia to Ukraine. That is what the White House is expected to propose. In fact, the Kremlin has also proposed something similar. But Ukraine is vehemently against this. Zelensky has rejected any territorial concessions.
Sanctions are needed, pressure is needed, strength is needed. The strength, first and foremost, of the United States, the strength of Europe, the strength of all nations in the world that want peace and stability in international relations. If Russia does not want to stop the war, then its economy must be stopped.
European capitals are also skeptical. They fear a deal that weakens NATO's deterrence. Which brings us to India. New Delhi's position here is pragmatic. end the war. But the Alaska meeting is significant for another reason. It's a chance to ease India-US tensions over Russian crude oil. Since the war began, India has been buying discounted Russian oil, and that too at the insistence of the Americans. The US wanted and encouraged India to buy from Russia to stabilize global oil prices. And this has been going on for 3 years. But now Donald Trump has a problem with it. First, he accused India of fueling the Russian war machine. Then he threatened tariffs. And last week, he followed through. Trump doubled tariffs on India to 50%. None of this made sense. Countries like China buy more Russian oil than India. And Europe still uses Russian gas. But Trump singled out India and New Delhi pushed back. The Prime Minister refused to compromise on India's interests, and now ministers have taken a veiled swipe at Trump.
जो दादागिरी करते इसलिए कर रहे कि वो आर्थिक दृष्टि से संपन्न है। दादागिरी इसलिए करते हैं कि उनके पास टेक्नोलॉजी है। अगर उनसे अच्छी टेक्नोलॉजी और रिसोर्सेज हमारे पास आएंगे तो हमें दादागिरी नहीं करनी है। हमारी संस्कृति ये कहती है कि विश्व का कल्याण हो।
कुछ लोग हैं जो भारत के का विकास जितनी तेजी के साथ हो रहा है उन्हें रास नहीं आ रहा है, उन्हें अच्छा नहीं लग रहा है। सबके बास तो हम हैं, भारत कैसे इतनी तेजी के साथ बढ़ रहा है।
Despite this, New Delhi's official position on the summit is warm because a breakthrough in Alaska will take some pressure off India. The Ministry of External Affairs has endorsed this meeting. I have their statement with me. This is what it says, and I'm quoting. The meeting holds the promise of bringing to an end the ongoing conflict in Ukraine and opening up the prospects for peace. As Prime Minister Narendra Modi has said on several occasions, this is not an era of war. India's interest is clear. Apart from the larger push for peace, a settlement might remove or soften restrictions on Russian trade. So India can continue with oil purchases and Trump can have his peace deal. He may even roll back his tariff war and pursue a trade deal with India. Plus, look at the timing. Just a few days back, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi spoke to Vladimir Putin about the conflict. India's National Security Advisor Ajit Doval was in Moscow. In fact, throughout this war, New Delhi has kept its messaging consistent. This is not an era of war. Today, Prime Minister Modi also spoke to Ukrainian President Zelensky. He conveyed the need for a peaceful resolution once again. So Alaska may be cold, but the stakes are hot. For Trump, it's about securing his legacy. For Putin, it's about addressing historical wrongs. And for India, it's about guarding its options.
This is News 18 Network. India's largest news network.
Role without due notice and a reasoned order. Rahul Gandhi has launched a fresh attack on the Election Commission, alleging that 300 opposition MPs were blocked from meeting the poll body, calling it a fight for the constitution and the principle of one man, one vote. In retaliation, the BJP has dared Rahul Gandhi to provide evidence of fake electors. BJP's Kiran Rijiju has accused the Congress of lying repeatedly.
कांग्रेस पार्टी और अपोजिशन ने बहुत समय बर्बाद कर दिया है। अब हम देश का समय और पार्लियामेंट का समय को और बर्बाद होने नहीं देंगे। तो सरकार महत्वपूर्ण बिल को पारित करना चाहते हैं। आज हम इम्पोर्टेंट बिल्स दोनों लोकसभा राज्यसभा में हम पारित करेंगे। एक आदमी का नासमझ और एक परिवार का वजह से देश इतना नुकसान नहीं झेल सकता है। पार्लियामेंट को रैंसम में नहीं रख सकता है। ऑपोजिशन के भी कई एमपीज ने आकर के बताया कि वो मजबूर है, उनका नेता ज़बरदस्ती हंगामा करने देते हैं। रोज रोज एक मुद्दे को लेकर के पार्लियामेंट का समय बर्बाद करना, ये हम लोग इस तरीके के जो समय बर्बाद करने के लिए देश का समय और संसद का समय बर्बाद करने के लिए हम नहीं देंगे। इसलिए महत्वपूर्ण बिल हम पारित करेंगे।
देखिए, हिंदुस्तान की डेमोक्रेसी की हालत देखिए। 300 एमपीज इलेक्शन कमीशन से मिलना चाहते हैं और कहते हैं कि हम डेलीगेशन लेके आएंगे, हम आपको एक डॉक्यूमेंट देना चाहते हैं। इलेक्शन कमीशन कहता है नहीं, 300 एमपीज नहीं आ सकते हैं। तो यही हालत है, क्योंकि डरते हैं। 1 मैन 1 वोट के बिना कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन का कोई मतलब नहीं है। और हमने क्लियरली दिखाया है कर्नाटक में कि वन मैन 1 वोट नहीं है। और इलेक्शन कमीशन जानता है, इलेक्शन कमीशन जानता है कि वो उसका जो डेटा है वो फटेगा। जो उसको अभी वो कंट्रोल करने की कोशिश कर रहा है, छुपाने की कोशिश कर रहा है, उसको हम निकाल देंगे।
आज स्पष्ट हो गया है कि राहुल गांधी जी सहित विपक्ष के सभी सांसद ना तो कोई चर्चा करना चाहते हैं, ना कोई कंस्ट्रक्टिव आउटकम में विश्वास करते हैं। इलेक्शन कमीशन को अपने संवैधानिक दायित्व को भी पूरा नहीं करने देना चाहते हैं। जो इन्होंने खुद ने अपनी अपनी सीटों में लोगों को गलत रजिस्टर करा के वोटर बनाए, अपना झूठ, अपनी चोरी छुपाने के लिए शायद ये पूरा यहाँ पे नाटक कर रहे हैं।
देखिए, मेरा खत कल चुनाव आयोग के लिए सीधा था और स्पष्ट तरीके से मैंने कहा था, लिखा था खत में कि सभी विपक्ष के सांसद शांतिपूर्वक मार्च कर रहे हैं पार्लियामेंट हाउस से लेकर निर्वाचन सदन तक, और सामूहिक तरीके से सारे सांसद इलेक्शन कमीशन को एक दस्तावेज पेश करना चाहते हैं एसआईआर को लेकर। यही हमारी मांग थी। और मैंने कल दोपहर को चुनाव आयोग
Now let's talk about Trump's trade war with India. The tariffs will kick in later this month, but for India, the costs are already mounting. Different parts of the economy are feeling the Trump effect. We'll start with the markets. Foreign investors are pulling out. They're dumping Indian equities. And how big is the damage so far? Nearly 18,000 crore rupees. That's more than $2 billion US dollars. This is the money that's already been pulled out from Indian stock markets. And who are these investors? FPIs, foreign portfolio investors. They've been turning bearish on India. This year alone, they've withdrawn more than 1 lakh crore rupees. 1 lakh crore rupees, that's over 11 billion US dollars. And why has this money been pulled out? Because investors feel that Indian markets have become more risky. And 3 factors stand out here. 1, escalating tensions between the US and India, especially on trade. 2, disappointing earnings from India Inc. And 3, a weakening rupee. You put these 3 together and the result is fragile sentiment and investors looking to cut their risk. This is hurting all businesses, but especially exporters. They face multiple challenges. For instance, banks are not sure about lending to them. Their loan applications are facing tougher scrutiny because now banks want to know if an exporter has dealings in the US, how big is their exposure, and what are their contingency plans. At least 5 large banks have put in place such checks. And 3 sectors in particular face intense scrutiny: textiles, gems, and jewelry. These are all export dependent and they face significant risk from the Trump tariffs. So it's understandable that banks are being careful with loans. And exporters too are trying to address these challenges. They're reworking their strategies. Some are shifting output from India, others are expanding in different markets. And a few of them are also exploring acquisitions in the US. We told you about all of this last week. Plus, they're also seeking government support. Industry bodies have asked for a range of measures: financial relief, refund on duties, deferment of interest on loans, penalty-free loans, and more. And the government is mulling all these options, including direct intervention. So expect an announcement on this front soon. For the moment, the RBI is doing its bit. RBI is the Reserve Bank of India. It's India's central bank. It has taken steps to defend the rupee. This month, the RBI sold dollars from its reserves. The aim is to stabilize the Indian rupee. How does that work? Like most central banks, the RBI holds dollars in its reserves. Now, when the rupee weakens, the bank sells those dollars in the open market and buys rupees in return. This pushes up the demand for the rupee and it helps lift its value. This time, the RBI has swapped $5 billion for rupees, and that helps strengthen the Indian currency. Last week, the rupee had fallen to 87.89 against the dollar. That's close to its all-time low. And this happened after Trump doubled the tariffs from 25 to 50%. You see, it's been a difficult year for the Indian currency. It's among Asia's worst performing currencies. The rupee has depreciated more than 2% this year, and roughly half of that fall came in the past 2 weeks, when Trump stepped up his trade war against India. And the recovery has been marginal. Today, the rupee was trading at 87.73. If it gets weaker, it could have sweeping repercussions. Yes, it can help exporters. It can potentially boost their earnings. If they do business in the dollar, they will earn more in rupees for their export. But in the present scenario and context, a weak rupee will do more harm than good. It can make India's imports more expensive. And this could increase inflation and have a ripple effect on India's growth. The tariffs will come into effect on the 27th of August. A deal with the US is still possible in the meantime. If not, India will have to brace for impact and build resilience. Our next story is about national security Trump style. The US president has struck a deal, this time with his country's biggest chip makers, NVIDIA and AMD. And in the process, Trump has turned US national security into a toll booth. Let me explain. This is a deal for chip sales to China. NVIDIA and AMD can now sell advanced chips to China. Trump is giving them a license. In return, his government will take a 15% cut. In other words, these companies will have to share 15% of their earnings with the US government. That is the deal. And these are not ordinary chips. They power the most demanding artificial intelligence systems. They can train complex models. They can drive autonomous technology with both civilian and military applications. Just 4 months ago, Washington had banned these sales. Exports of 2 chips were banned in April, NVIDIA's H20 and AMD's MI308. The US was against their sales to China. It was termed too dangerous, not in the interest of national security. That's what Washington said. These chips were supposed to be off limits to China. And security officials had endorsed this ban. They said NVIDIA's H20 chip was, and I'm quoting, a potent accelerator of China's AI capabilities. So there was a lot of concern apparently 4 months ago. But true to his style, Trump has changed his mind, and with it, he's changed America's policy on chip sales. How did that come about? Last week, there was a meeting at the White House. Jensen Huang met Donald Trump. Huang is NVIDIA's CEO. He has been lobbying for months, both in Washington and in Beijing. And 2 days after his meeting with Trump, the president's Commerce Department is issuing licenses again. Clearly, Huang's charm has worked. China is a big market for his company, and he wants to keep selling to them.
NVIDIA has been coming to China for 30 years. As you know, China is the second largest technology market in the world. And it is also growing very quickly. And so this is a very important market. There's a lot of very dynamic and innovative customers. If you want to be a good supplier, a good company, you have to have excellent customers as well as excellent products. And so in China, we have very challenging and very dynamic and very innovative customers. And we want to be able to serve them. And so I will continue to do that.
He seems to have got his wish now. AMD too can start selling their chips to China again as long as they share 15% of their earnings with Washington. Remember, this is not export control, this is revenue sharing. It makes the Trump administration a commercial partner for chip makers. So how much do they expect to earn? This year, NVIDIA is expected to sell chips worth $15 billion. We're talking about the H20 chips, $15 billion. And AMD is looking at sales worth $800 million. So with a 15% cut, the US government could end up with more than $2 billion. Trump would be thrilled by that. But his critics are not. Look at what former officials are saying, and I'm quoting. This is the Trump playbook applied in exactly the wrong domain. You're selling our national security for corporate profits. It's a former national security official. Here's another one. You either have a national security problem or you don't. If you have a 15% payment, it doesn't somehow eliminate the national security issue. Security experts say that this is a strategic mistake. It gives Beijing a playbook. It can pressure firms, force them to make concessions, and ultimately pay for access. It also sets a dangerous precedent. This deal is extraordinary because it turns national security into a negotiation. The kind where the outcome is like a payment plan with no red lines and just a price tag, 15% of your revenue. With this model, President Trump has put US security up for sale. The message for Beijing and the world is clear: pay the toll and pass the gate. Now let's turn our attention to Turkey. A powerful earthquake has struck the western part of the country. The epicenter is a town called Sindhur. One person has been killed. More than a dozen buildings have collapsed. But more than the damage, it's the horror that this quake brings back. Turkey saw a devastating earthquake just 2 years back. It killed more than 50,000 people. In fact, this country is no stranger to tremors. It sits on multiple tectonic plates. 95% of the country's land is at risk of a major earthquake, and the one that struck today is just another reminder of that risk. Here's our report.
It was a powerful earthquake. The epicenter was in western Turkey, but the tremors were felt as far as Istanbul. That's almost 200 kilometers away. In 2023, a 7.8 magnitude quake had struck Turkey. Over 50 people had died in that disaster, and in the aftershocks that followed. Today's earthquake wasn't as bad as that. Until this evening, only one person had lost their life. But there is still considerable damage. Over a dozen buildings have collapsed. The epicenter is a town called Sindhur. Pictures from there show large buildings reduced to rubble, streets filled with piles of twisted metal and debris.
Yes, we felt it very strongly. It was like a magnitude 7. All the children were very scared. We have never felt an earthquake like this in Balıkesir before. I mean, it was a very strong earthquake. Everyone is outside right now, and we are in fear. I hope it doesn't happen again.
Earthquakes are not rare in Turkey. In 2020 alone, the country recorded almost 33,000 quakes. Over 300 of them were above magnitude 4. Why so many earthquakes? It's about location and tectonic plates. What are tectonic plates? The Earth's outer shell is broken into huge, rigid slabs, like pieces of a cracked eggshell. These pieces float on a softer layer beneath. Heat from Earth's interior creates slow currents. These currents drag the plates a few centimeters a year, about as fast as your fingernails grow. Turkey is located at the intersection of 3 major tectonic plates. So, it experiences frequent seismic activity as a result. One of them is the Anatolian tectonic plate. It's wedged between the Eurasian and African plates, and pinned from the south by the Arabian plate. The North Anatolian Fault is one of the most dangerous fault lines in the world. It has caused devastating quakes in the past, like the earthquakes in 1999, which killed nearly 18,000 people. The East Anatolian Fault runs for 650 kilometers. It's another high-risk zone. And the Aegean Sea Plate, in the southwest,
adds even more seismic activity. The result is this: 95% of Turkey land is earthquake-prone. A third of the country, including Istanbul and Izmir, is at high risk. Today's quake may not match the deadliest in Turkey's history, but it's a reminder the country is sitting on a fault line, and the ground here can move at any time.
Tensions are flaring between China and the Philippines. Last week it was a war of words. This week it's a naval confrontation, a risky chase at sea, a dangerous collision, and the possibility of a grave miscalculation. Let me tell you what happened. Earlier today, a Philippine Coast Guard vessel was sailing in the South China Sea, specifically near the Scarborough Shoal. This is a coral reef island claimed by both sides. Today, Manila was dropping aid to fishermen in the region. That's when China meddled. Two of their ships began chasing Manila's vessel, one PLA Navy warship and one Chinese Coast Guard ship. They fired water cannons at the Filipino vessel. They also pulled off dangerous maneuvers in front of it. The result? The two Chinese ships ended up colliding. Take a look.
China's Coast Guard vessel number.
The Coast Guard ship took a battering. Just look at the front part of the vessel. It has suffered substantial damage. Manila says the Chinese ship is now unseaworthy, meaning it can sail, but it cannot perform all its duties. After the collision, the Filipino ship reached out. They offered medical help.
This is Philippine Coast Guard vessel BRP Teresa Magbanwa, MRRV 9701. We have medical personnel on board. Should you need any assistance, we are willing to provide assistance. Over.
And what is China saying? They have not reported the collision. In fact, they say they were acting within the law, that they managed to drive away the Filipino vessels. Sure, if this is the strategy, good luck. Just ram into each other to drive away your rivals. But seriously, this is extremely dangerous. And it's not isolated either. China is becoming more and more reckless in the South China Sea. They're regularly confronting Filipino vessels. We saw similar incidents in May, last December, last June, and last April. Today, things went one step ahead. China's risky moves led to a direct collision. But what if the Chinese ship had collided with a Filipino ship? What if the collision had injured or killed Filipino sailors? Then the issue may have escalated. The question is, what led to this latest flare-up? Possibly the Filipino president's interview to us. His name is Ferdinand Marcos Jr. He spoke to First Post last week when he visited India. And in that conversation, he spoke about Taiwan. Listen to this.
Experts fear that Beijing will invade Taiwan before the end of this decade. If that were to happen while you're still in power, would you be open to allowing the U.S. use resources and bases in the Philippines to defend Taiwan, or would you rather stay out of it?
To be very practical about it, if there is a confrontation over Taiwan between China and the United States, there is no way that the Philippines can stay out of it, simply because of our physical geographic location. So if you think about it, if there is an all-out war, then we will be drawn into it. And I assure you with the greatest hesitation, but we will have to defend our territory and our sovereignty.
That triggered the Chinese. They condemned Marcos' statement. They accused him of playing with fire, but the president is not backing down. He says Beijing is misinterpreting his comments on Taiwan. At the same time, he doubled down on them.
We are, I think, for propaganda purposes, misinterpreted. If there is a war over Taiwan, we will be drawn. Hihilain tayo sa aya't gusto natin. Kicking and screaming. We will be drawn and dragged into that mess.
Whatever you do, come on, wag na tayong hope. I love this saying, hope is not a plan. I hope it doesn't happen. I hope it doesn't. But if it does, we have to plan for it already.
At the root of this crisis is territory. China claims most of the South China Sea, but those same parts are claimed by other countries too, like Vietnam, the Philippines and Brunei. With the Philippines, there are multiple disputes, but two stand out. The first is the Scarborough Shoal, the second is the Spratly Islands. China has taken over these places with force. The Philippines controlled the Scarborough Shoal until 2012, but that year China seized it from Manila. Since then, they have blocked Filipino voyages near it, and they refuse to climb down. Global courts have rejected China's claims. Most countries have condemned their land grabs, but China is undeterred. They have tried to build military structures on these disputed sites, basically to try and cement their grip over their territories. Recently, some countries have pushed back, like the Philippines. Manila is a treaty ally of the US. They seem confident enough to challenge China. President Marcos made that clear to us.
Your recent State of the Nation address is coming under a lot of scrutiny. In last year's speech, you promised to not yield even an inch of Philippine land in disputed areas. This year, your statement did not make an explicit mention of that, of the West Philippine Sea, but you focused more on non-alignment on Manila's part. Would you say you watered down your statement? Did you, and why?
No, I did not. You're the second person to ask me that. Let me say it again. The Philippines will not cede 1 square inch of our territory. We will not give up the exercise of our sovereign rights.
China is playing a dangerous game here. This is not some harmless cat and mouse chase. This is a maritime face-off. These are big navies with a lot of firepower. Even the smallest mistake could be fatal. And knowing China, they will be licking their wounds. Beijing is very proud of its navy. But what happened today is not a good look on them. How can two of your ships just ram into each other, that too in wide open sea? A hurt China may be looking for round 2. It may not happen tomorrow or this week, but the overall trajectory is not good. Gaza journalist Anas al-Sharif was live on his phone on Sunday night. It's something that he did almost every day for the past 2 years, showing the world what was happening around him. But minutes later, he was hit by an Israeli strike. It killed him and 4 other journalists. Israel says it was not a mistake, that Anas was in fact a Hamas commander. And this is not the first such case. Since 2023, 270 journalists have been killed in Gaza. The question is, why are journalists being targeted? And what does it have to do with Netanyahu's plan to take over Gaza City? Our next report tells you.
These were the last few minutes of Anas al-Sharif's life. He was doing what he had done almost every day for the past 22 months, holding up his phone and posting urgent updates on X. Moments before Monday midnight, his words warned of intense, concentrated bombardment in Gaza City. He had been through this before. Fire belts, as the military calls them. The sky turning into a ceiling of flames. But this time the explosions were closer. So close, they were aimed at him. Minutes later, an Israeli drone strike ripped through the journalist's tent outside Gaza City's Al-Shifa hospital. The blast killed 5 Al Jazeera staff, including al-Sharif, one of the most recognizable faces of Arabic reporting from Gaza. Israel's army didn't deny the strike. In fact, it said killing al-Sharif was deliberate. The official statement claimed he wasn't really a journalist at all, but a Hamas commander posing as one. They promised unequivocal proof. None has been produced, yet. For the people of Gaza, al-Sharif's life was an open book. Born in the Jabalia refugee camp, father of 2, son of a man killed in an earlier airstrike, he spent his days in front of a camera. The UN Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Expression called the accusations unsubstantiated. Human rights groups call it something else entirely, a part of a pattern, because al-Sharif is not the first, or the 10th, or even the 100th. Gaza's press corps has been thinned to the bone. Nearly 270 journalists and media workers have been killed since the war began. Many were accused, without evidence, of being Hamas members. All of them were killed.
What happened to these journalists is a complex Israeli crime against the journalistic family, a crime against humanity, a crime against freedom, a crime against journalism. These young men and these journalists were only killed, tortured, burned, arrested, or wounded because they chose to report the suffering of their people, women, elderly, and children.
The strike came just as Benjamin Netanyahu rolled out his most controversial move yet, a full military takeover of Gaza City. The Israeli leader insists it's the fastest way to end the war. The United Nations warns it is a recipe for another calamity. The plan is to capture the city, wipe out Hamas's 2 remaining strongholds, rescue the hostages, and install what Netanyahu calls an alternative civil administration.
The war can end tomorrow if Gaza, or rather if Hamas, lays down its arms and releases all the remaining hostages. Gaza will be demilitarized. Israel will have overriding security responsibility. A security zone will be established on Gaza's border with Israel to prevent future terrorist incursions. A civilian administration will be established in Gaza that will seek to live in peace with Israel.
On paper, it's about security. In reality, analysts say it's also about Netanyahu's political survival. Inside Israel, not everyone is convinced. Hostage families are calling for a general strike. Former soldiers are marching with signs reading, "I refused." And every weekend, protests fill Tel Aviv, Haifa, and Jerusalem.
We have about 70.
So as Netanyahu maps out a new Gaza, the city itself is still burning. Hospitals running on fumes, streets carved open by bombs, families sleeping in the rubble of what used to be their homes, journalists being targeted for reporting. For ordinary Gazans, the Israeli takeover isn't a strategy on paper. It's the sound of tanks at the edge of the block and the fear of what comes after. Because in present-day Gaza, there is no uncertainty of a tomorrow.
This is News 18 Network. India's largest news network.
Role without due notice and a reasoned order. Rahul Gandhi has launched a fresh attack on the Election Commission, alleging that 300 opposition MPs were blocked from meeting the poll body, calling it a fight for the constitution and the principle of one man, one vote. In retaliation, the BJP has dared Rahul Gandhi to provide evidence of fake electors. BJP's Kiran Rijiju has accused the Congress of lying repeatedly.
कांग्रेस पार्टी और अपोजिशन ने बहुत समय बर्बाद कर दिया है। अब हम देश का समय और पार्लियामेंट का समय को और बर्बाद होने नहीं देंगे। तो सरकार महत्वपूर्ण बिल को पारित करना चाहते हैं। आज हम इम्पोर्टेंट बिल्स दोनों लोकसभा राज्यसभा में हम पारित करेंगे। एक आदमी का नासमझ और एक परिवार का वजह से देश इतना नुकसान नहीं झेल सकता है। पार्लियामेंट को रैंसम में नहीं रख सकता है। ऑपोजिशन के भी कई एमपीज ने आकर के बताया कि वो मजबूर है, उनका नेता ज़बरदस्ती हंगामा करने देते हैं। रोज़ रोज़ एक मुद्दे को लेकर के पार्लियामेंट का समय बर्बाद करना, ये हम लोग इस तरीके के जो समय बर्बाद करने के लिए देश का समय और संसद का समय बर्बाद करने के लिए हम नहीं देंगे। इसलिए महत्वपूर्ण बिल हम पारित करेंगे।
देखिए, हिंदुस्तान की डेमोक्रेसी की हालत देखिए। 300 एमपीज इलेक्शन कमीशन से मिलना चाहते हैं और कहते हैं कि हम डेलीगेशन लेके आएंगे, हम आपको एक डॉक्यूमेंट देना चाहते हैं। इलेक्शन कमीशन कहता है नहीं, 300 एमपीज नहीं आ सकते हैं। तो यही हालत है, क्योंकि डरते हैं। 1 मैन 1 वोट के बिना कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन का कोई मतलब नहीं है। और हमने क्लियरली दिखाया है कर्नाटक में कि वन मैन 1 वोट नहीं है। और इलेक्शन कमीशन जानता है, इलेक्शन कमीशन जानता है कि वो उसका जो डेटा है वो फटेगा। जो उसको अभी वो कंट्रोल करने की कोशिश कर रहा है, छुपाने की कोशिश कर रहा है, उसको हम निकाल देंगे।
आज स्पष्ट हो गया है कि राहुल गांधी जी सहित विपक्ष के सभी सांसद ना तो कोई चर्चा करना चाहते हैं, ना कोई कंस्ट्रक्टिव आउटकम में विश्वास करते हैं। इलेक्शन कमीशन को अपने संवैधानिक दायित्व को भी पूरा नहीं करने देना चाहते हैं। जो इन्होंने खुद ने अपने अपनी सीटों में लोगों को गलत रजिस्टर करा के वोटर।
This is News 18 Network. India's largest news network.
And shifting focus to some more news that's coming in. A Pakistani intruder attempting to sneak in to the Indian territory was shot at by the BSF in Kathua near the international border. The injured Pakistani intruder has been apprehended by the BSF in the Rajbagh area of Kathua. That's the big piece of news that's coming in, where what we are learning is that a Pakistani intruder attempting to sneak into Indian territory was shot at by the BSF at the international border in the Kathua region. The injured Pakistani intruder has now been apprehended by the BSF, and this entire incident took place in the Rajbagh area of Kathua. So infiltrator being targeted by the BSF, and now he has been taken into custody of the border security force. This Pakistani intruder attempted to sneak into India, and he was shot at by the BSF at the international border in the Kathua area. To get more details and even details on the recoveries from this particular intruder who was trying to sneak into India from Pakistan, I'm joined by my colleague Tejinder Singh Sodhi on the broadcast. Tejinder, give us the details.
Yes, Ayushman, this Pakistani national who was trying to sneak into the Indian territory through the international border in the Rajbagh area of Kathua was first challenged by the border security force. The border security force asked him to stop.
Every day, Indian internet has a new target. Today, it was Asim Munir. His truthful analogy has delighted Indians on social media. Asim Munir called India a shiny Mercedes and a Ferrari, but he called Pakistan a dump truck. One is expensive and fast, the other is bloated, slow, and used to carry garbage. A lot like Pakistan's generals. But frankly, we disagree with social media. We don't think Munir is right. The idea that Pakistan can buy a dump truck is preposterous. Borrow one from China? Maybe. Beg for one from Trump? Possible. But their own truck? That's how you know it's fiction.
ऐसा केक तुमने जिंदगी में देखा भी नहीं होगा। आज मैं खिलाता हूं तुझे। ये क्या कर रहे हैं आप सर? मुंह मीठा कर रहा हूं तेरा।
इसमें से खा लेता हूं, क्या पता।
Hello and welcome to the late night edition with me, Ayushman Singh Jamwal. Breaking news coming in on the international front, where US President Donald Trump has made a big statement ahead of his meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Trump has said, and I quote, "I will tell Putin to end the war with Ukraine and he will not mess with me," is what the US President has said. The US President further said that Zelensky should not have started the war, putting the onus of the entire conflict on the Ukrainian side. Listen in.
Look, this is Joe Biden's war. This is not my war. I made a deal with NATO a month ago. You covered it very accurately, actually. We don't pay anything anymore. You know, we're not paying anything. They are buying things from us, and NATO is paying us. I got it raised from 2% of GDP to 5%. And they're paying us for everything that we send. We're not paying. But Biden approved $350 billion. Europe has spent $100 billion. The money that's been spent and the death is incredible. It's the worst thing that's happened, by far the worst that's happened since World War II. So I'm going in to speak to Vladimir Putin. And I'm going to be telling him, you got to end this war. You got to end it. And he wasn't going to mess with me. This war would have never happened. You know, we had a discussion about it one time, and we never had that discussion again. Would have never happened. And when the election was rigged, and then Biden took office, which was barely took office, the auto pen took office, bad things started happening. Bad things, stupid things were said, and it ended up in a war. But